despite the absence of any evidence of sabotage or espionage 6 months after Pearl Harbor? Indeed, the United States had the disgrace to follow the Queen of Hearts and Alice in Wonderland through a General John DeWitt, who was sent to the West Coast by Franklin Roosevelt to survey the risk the Japanese Americans were creating to the United States by perhaps signaling Hirohito and others where they should bomb. After the 6-month survey, he had no evidence whatsoever of any untoward behavior. So he writes, "This is a very, very alarming, confirming indication that treason is afoot, because otherwise they would not have made it so difficult to uncover the incriminating evidence." Now, the knave is guilty because he didn't sign his name to the letter confessing he stole the tarts. I mean, and sending 120,000. Now, that wasn't the end of it. We also imposed the draft on the Japanese Americans serving in the concentration camps. Now, many of them had volunteered, indeed ended up being the most medaled Air Force squadrons flying over Italy. But we prosecuted a handful of Japanese Americans, said, "You're asking me to fight for my serfdom and vassalage to you?" We didn't have any reluctance to do that because we were also complacent with the fact that the blacks serving in the armed forces were segregated. Couldn't drink at the same water fountains as whites, but hey, they're fighting for liberty, bro. So this problem that we confront, times of war, is not unique today. Need to go back to Ecclesiastes. What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There's nothing new under the sun. And I use that as a preface to making the observation that Tacitus made and applying it to present-day United States. He wrote, as the Roman Republic degenerated into the Roman Empire, "The worst crimes were dared by a few, willed by more, tolerated by all." And as the Weimar Republic in Germany after World War II degenerated into the Third Reich, same. Worst crimes dared by a few, willed by more, tolerated by all. The crimes of the government that have been enumerated today by Glenn and Jacob and Jack, same thing. Dared by a few, willed by more, and tolerated by all. And that simply is not acceptable if we wish to regain our status as a republic. I want to go back to even a more fundamental germ of our birth as a nation, to examine why it is we ought to be alarmed at where we are today. Now, when men and women first decided to move from a state of nature and organize political societies, there was a majority and a minority view of what the purpose of government was, of political association was. Now, the majority view was that people got together in order to aggrandize their military power so they could acquire additional territory, coerce other people, rob and plunder. And that was the majority view from the Old Testament onward. The minority view, and one that I think fueled the American Revolution, was that governments are formed from a state of nature with a social compact to create a society where men and women could be wise and magnanimous and knowledgeable and virtuous. That was the goal. The individual was the center of the national universe, not going abroad in search of monsters to destroy. And that's a very fundamental idea that separated the United States from every other nation in the world, even though at the outset we were 13 small states on the eastern seaboard with a tiny population and 6 frigates. But that idea was what Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote about in Conquered Him. I have a prejudice since I was born in Cambridge for Conquered Him. By the rude bridge that arched the flood, their flags to April's breeze unfurled. Here once the embattled farmer stood and fired the shot heard round the world. And that was the shot that was heard and sent tremors throughout all of Europe and in Asia, where tyrants feared people would believe, hey, The purpose of this exercise, the social compact, isn't to aggrandize government authority, to enable them, like Julius Caesar, to say, I came, I saw, I conquered. But the purpose is to create and establish and secure the liberty of the individual, who would then be able to chart his or her own destiny, whatever it was. Overcome struggles. That was to be number one in the world. Not number one in the world in weapons, in military bases, in coercing other people, in arrogantly stating we're the ones who have angelic DNA and you have all Lucifer in your body, and therefore you should crave that we will come rescue you from your sinning. Can you imagine how insulting that seems to those who are abroad? Can you imagine walking into someone's living room and saying, I'm superior to you, I'm coming to rescue you from your folly, and you should do what I tell you. You don't know what's really good for you and how dangerous it is not to worry about Taliban or Al-Qaeda or someone else. And if you look at our political culture today, it is what I would call it fluctuates between the adolescent and the infantile. And I say that, unfortunately, with great seriousness. I say I have to confront it every day in Congress. Because it's conceived as indistinguishable from a football game. Got one team, red team, blue team, whatever, everyone cheers, and the mental universe cannot get outside the concept that what's good for me is bad for the other guy. And all is preoccupied with, can I stay in power? It's not like adult politics is, hey, if we all hang together, we'll all hang separately. And the goal of politics is to make everybody a winner, to create a fair and even playing field so that everyone has a fair chance in life, to have a rule of law, and hope everybody wins. We don't gloat that somebody else loses or has a bad day. Oh, they made a gotcha moment. I mean, see, that's what we grew out of. 5 years old out of the sandbox. And that's the staple of political discourse. The Founding Fathers would be shocked. If you want to be very jarred to witness the total degradation of our political culture, in fact, it's so acute, it shakes confidence in Darwin's theory of evolution, right? Survival of the fittest. Read the Annals of Congress, which recount the first debates over the creation of the judiciary and First Bank of the United States and otherwise, and read the congressional record today. Those people at the outset were literate. They understood, they made allusions to historical events, the dangers of absolute power. And today, I mean, it's subliterate. Maybe it's subliterate. You know, anything beyond the polysyllabic way, that's going way too far. And to say this, not to be pedantic, but the mastery of politics is the most difficult discipline to master because it relates to curbing the human tendency to abuse absolute power, to crush people, to abuse them. And that's a difficult task to master. Indeed, most of the time it fails because the art of putting together separation of powers, of fragmenting power, to have a government strong enough to ensure the rule of law, but not so strong that it crushes liberty, is the most taxing and difficult in the history of mankind and why it generally fails. That's why you will see after Arab Spring, everyone says, oh, by spontaneous combustion we'll have some new birth of freedom and liberty. No, you just have different tyrants to be the tyranny of the majority, which we're witnessing today in Libya, or we're witnessing in Iraq already. Egypt's the same. And does anyone believe that after spending $500 billion and all our soldiers in Afghanistan, we have now imparted to them the genius of political liberty? You know, it's a complete joke. And if we don't grow up and acquire and practice adult politics, which again transcends this idea, Republican, Democrat, it's the values of who we are as a people. And it's focusing not so much as we are today, well, these are the bad guys, so we can't afford habeas corpus or due process. We don't do habeas corpus and due process because of them. We do it because what it says about us. We don't want to imprison someone without a fair hearing and trial. We don't want to permit the executive branch to detain without accusation or charge, because it's a commentary on our values, not theirs. So this argument, well, the Saudis wouldn't give us these rights, or they would never afford our soldiers these rights. So what? That defines them as savages in many respects. We don't want to emulate them. It's our lives and credibility and values that are on the line. And we know what we believe in. As Abraham Lincoln said, as I would not be a slave, so I would not be a master.